All right, guys, good evening. Glad that you're here. And those online, thank you guys for being here as well, or if you catch this later, that's helpful. One of the things that I've noticed that is nice about having all the Wednesday nights recorded and stuff is that people will go back and they'll ask a question, and I'll say, well, just go look at it online. You can see it there, and they'll say, okay, well, I'll go check that out. So it is good to kind of have that kind of resource library, I guess, just kind of recorded, which is nice that technology can do that. So I know that COVID did not bring all good things or anything, but that was one thing that kind of picked up was the online record your stuff, be able to people to access it if they're sick, which we do have a lot of people sick as well, just flu and stuff tonight. Several people text me and said, I can't be there, or pray for me, I'm sick, or weren't there on Sunday. So anyways, I know the sickness is making its rounds, so we will pray for those folks at the end. So tonight, in our The Bible Has Answers series, I want to talk a little bit about this, that what does it mean to have a Christian work ethic? I was meeting with some pastors last month, and they really were discouraged because they said in their church, and obviously this is not just in their church, but just with believers in general, and I wouldn't even necessarily say all believers. I think the focus was more on those who were maybe younger, those under like 45 years old. They had just noticed this kind of massive trend of just, and I don't even know if the word is entitlement or just I don't want to do that, or I'm really frustrated at what I'm doing, or I don't really like what I'm doing. And that could be in any and all things. That could be in a place in ministry that somebody's like, hey, man, I really could use you here. You're gifted in this area, whatever the case may be. And they were just like, we were just talking about somewhat of just in the Christian sphere of the lack of work ethic and dependability. All of those things were kind of discussed. And then the conversation came up here with somebody last week, and we were just discussing that. They were discussing things in their workplace that were just whatever. And this was a younger, I say younger Christian, under 40, and they just said, like, my goal is to be faithful in wherever I'm put at work or wherever I need to be serving at church, in the ministry. And I just thought, well, that's a phenomenal attitude, which it's not, that doesn't tend to be the overall attitude of just everybody. So I thought tonight may be a good night to just kind of dive into what does it mean to have a Christian work ethic? Like, what is that supposed to look like? Now, we will talk about stuff in jobs, that'll be kind of a main focus of that. But I would say that this would be applied to anything that you do. If you're helping somebody, if you're volunteering, if you're serving in ministry, if you're, taking something and doing something with your neighbor or something in the neighborhood, or if you volunteer to be a part of the HOA, like whatever the facet may be for that, there's application for this. And so I was looking up some statistics. I just always like to kind of see what things are polling. And this isn't always 100%, but I thought that these sounded pretty accurate when I checked several polls, that 35% of Americans that were polled stated that they were not very satisfied with their jobs. And that could be pay, promotion, position, their work environment, their boss, whatever the case may be. 35% of Americans roughly just really don't like what they do, right? And that's probably not completely crazy when you think about all the people that are working in the U.S. And then the opposite of that, was about 40% of the Americans were extremely satisfied in what they did. Now, that's pretty good, right? If you're almost a half of Americans that are going, I'm pretty okay with what I'm doing. I'm not angry at what I'm doing. I'm satisfied in it. And also, too, that 40% stated that they found their identity, kind of who they are in what they do. Now, if you guys have ever kind of noticed, because the point I'm going to make is that this isn't good to be completely unsatisfied with what you're doing, almost going, I just wish something would happen so I could leave, and also to find your identity completely in a job. Well, that's extremely dangerous, because I would assume that most people in here have had more than one specific job their entire life, right? You've probably done multiple different things in your life, be it part-time stuff or full-time stuff. And so it's not good to go, I just can't stand my job, I don't want to be satisfied in this, or to go, oh, my whole identity is wrapped up in this. Now, I didn't realize this till I probably got to like college and just in academic worlds and meeting people. So many people, when you meet them, and this was always kind of a conversation starter for me, but I didn't realize that there was so much weight to it, especially in the South. People will meet somebody, hey, how you doing? What do you do for work? You ever notice that? So what do you do? What do you do for work? Like if two men get together and they don't really know each other, like because their spouses are like, oh, you should hang out with my friend's husband. And like you're hanging out or whatever, you're like, oh, wonderful. You know, so you're like, hey, what are you doing? And then they'll go like, well, what do you do for work? Well, immediately, like, typically there tends to be, when that happens, they are kind of sizing and gauging you up based on what you do, right? A little bit, you know? If you're like, hey, you know, I run a local Fortune 500 company. It's like, oh, look at this guy, you know? Or if somebody's a police officer or a firefighter, like, it's just like a really neat, it was amazing to me when people would talk to us, well, what do you do? When I was with the State Patrol, well, what do you do for work? And Stephanie, you know, would be like, oh, he's a state trooper. And they'd be like, oh, my gosh, tell me a story. What have you seen? What kind of crazy stuff do you get into? Okay, and then, like, now, if people are like, so what do you do? I'm like, I'm a pastor. They're like, okay, what do you? You know, either they're very encouraged by that or they're like, I better watch my mouth around you, huh? You know, like what I'm saying is based on job, so much of that shifts as far as how they, like, see you, right? And it can be helpful to have a job because you may know a ton about a specific thing as opposed to, I just hate my job or whatever. So anyways, the point being is that there's a lot of Americans that are really satisfied with their job, and there's quite a few Americans that just are not satisfied with what they do. And so I think my kind of goal tonight is to kind of look at the scriptures and just go, it is okay. And I would just say this to anybody listening, anybody that's young, because if you're older, you realize, like, there will be times of up and times of down. You just realize that. Sometimes you don't always get the promotion. Sometimes you don't always come in leading a whole team. You have to work your way into that. And I think there's just a lot, to be honest, just a lot of entitlement with younger people going, I feel like I should be in this position. And if I don't get what I want, I just won't work. Or I'm not going to do that. Or I'm just going to badmouth the company or whatever the case may be. And so I see a lot of that just with younger people, not necessarily in our church, but just in the world. And I just go, man, they're just not, and I think the main word that I'm looking for is contentment. It's just being content at where God has you for the moment. Because here's the thing. If you're young, you think, well, this is what I'm going to do forever, I guess. And when you're older, you're like, well, that's not always true. Like, there will be so much shift and change. When you guys got married, I'm just two of our couples in here that have been married the longest in here. When you got married, you probably, if somebody said, you know where you're going to be in 30, 40, 50 years in this spot, you'd probably been like, I don't know, maybe. Like that may not even have made sense to you. So the point is that nothing is necessarily forever. So let's look at this. So Genesis 2:15 and then Genesis 3. I just want to look at this as far as a pre-fall and a post-fall world. So in the pre-fall world, before sin enters, before Genesis 3, where we have the serpent who tempts Adam and Eve and they fall, and then sin rushes in, they're broken, they see their brokenness, they feel their brokenness. So before that, in Genesis 2:15, we have God who places Adam in the Garden of Eden. And he says this, the Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. Like before the fall, before sin entered and things were broken, Adam had a job, which that job specifically was to work the ground and keep up the garden. Like, that's remarkable because God could have made it completely self-sustaining where there was no need to do any work. Like, why do you need to work? Everything's fine. Just walk around and just eat fruit. Well, no, like there is going to be, now the work was going to be obviously significantly easier in a pre-fall world than a post-fall world. But the point being is this, is that even in God's most ideal design, work was a part of the process. And I'm going to be honest, I just see and meet so many people who are just absolutely lazy. Like they do not want to work. There is no drive. There is no effort. There's just not really much motivation at all to do that. And a lot of that is because our culture and people don't always want to say this, parents and even grandparents at times have become enablers for that individual to just not do a thing. Now, here's the thing. I don't know if you think, and I'm not speaking to our people in here, but people I've met, I'm like, I don't know if you think that's going to be helpful for that kid when he's 20. Like, that's a problem if he is not made to do anything now. I can walk around the grocery store, and I'm gonna hit a few tangents tonight. I can walk around the grocery store, and yesterday I was in Walmart, and I try not to go during any peak hours, because there's 30 people watching me check my stuff out with 30 people in front of me, and they're just watching me do this. And then they're like, "Let me see your receipt." I'm like, "Ma'am, I'm not trained on this machine." Like, y'all should just do it if you're just gonna like examine everybody's stuff. So I'm in the store, and I probably passed y'all 3 or 4 families of 2 or more kids, and all the kids are in the buggy. They're all in the buggy. There's a mom and a dad. The mom or the dad is pushing one buggy with nothing but the children in it. So they're not even walking. And they're just looking at iPads. All of them are. And then the mom or the dad is in the other buggy with the food. And I'm going, okay, we have 2 buggies. One with the group of idle screen watchers, and then one person shopping. And I'm just going like, I wanted to stop and be like, is this family time? Is this what you just go to Walmart and like you push the kids who watch the screen? You could have just stayed home and done that. Or your restaurants, right? Everybody's glued to the screen. And so the problem with that becomes like, there are so many studies out, because we just really don't do hardly any screen time at our house. That is what we do. I would recommend that heavily to everybody. Monday through Friday, there is no television watched in our home. It doesn't even come on. Doesn't even come on. The kids' homework, and they go play. And then on the weekends, there may be some a little bit for like kind of a reward type thing. But like, there are so many studies that show that if kids are watching television and screen time before the age of 15, if they're engulfed in that, like they are, the unemployment rate, all of those things skyrocket for those children who are glued to the screen. So it's just dangerous. So pre-fall, you were supposed to work. Post-fall, we see this in Genesis 3, after the fall. It says this, and to Adam he said, so God he has the conversation with the serpent, the conversation with the woman Eve, and now Adam. And to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. So he's saying this, so he's like, from this to this, there was still work, but it just got exponentially harder. Like, Adam, shocker, you may plant something and it doesn't grow. Whereas in this setting, in this garden, everything was going to grow. Like, everything was just going to flourish. Well, now it's going to be extremely hard. So I get that work has become difficult. Like, it has become heavier and more heavy laden since the fall. But that is no reason that we should not. That is no reason why we should pull back from that, because it is God's design that we do work. And then I'll just read verses 20 through 23. It says, the man called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living, and the Lord God made for Adam and for his wife garments of skin and clothed them. And the Lord said, behold, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. Now, at least he reach out his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore, the Lord sent him out from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he was taken. So, work in the garden, kicked out of the garden, you still got to work. So in both places, there is work to be done. There is labor that is going to be done. Obviously, this is going to be much more heavy-laden labor, but there is work to be done. And then so throughout all the Old Testament, and I just kind of pulled this one text out of Leviticus 23:22, work was just just something that the Israelites were doing. Like, it was just something that they had to do. Leviticus 23:22 says this, and when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, nor shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor, and for the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. So, I mean, harvesting, with planting and harvesting, and if you've ever had to do any of that, you know how laborsome that is. Even if you just have a 20 by 20 garden, there's a lot of work that takes place just to get the final product out of the ground. Of course, most of us, we're grateful that we can just go to Ingles and just pick out the fruit or the vegetables that we want or whatever, our produce, so we can do that. But obviously, then, I mean, everything was, if you didn't do it, it probably didn't get done. Or if you didn't trade with somebody for something for somebody else's stuff, you just didn't get anything. So working was important. And also, too, in Leviticus 23, we see this. He says, listen, when you harvest the land, don't reap right up to the edge of the field. Leave that so that sojourners, that people could come through, poor people could come and get that. Now, what story do we have in the Old Testament where we kind of see that happening? In Ruth. Yeah, he was like, man, let's leave that. She's saying, hey, can I glean in your field? He's like, yeah, you can glean. Hey, guys, don't mess with the outer edges. Let her come and she can get some. So even in that, it isn't just work, and store for yourself. It's, hey, look, you can bless other people with this, because in reality, all of us have a little bit of excess. I know everybody's like, man, times are super tough, which they are. I'm not denying that. But there's always, the Lord is always in my life provided not just what we needed, but somewhat of an abundance in places where we can bless other people and be faithful. So, but also too, like when we work, and I have never met a hardworking guy. I have never met a hardworking guy that wasn't exhausted and just obviously heavy laden with what he's doing. But men that work hard tend to be men, not always, but especially in the Christian world, just men of high character. Have we noticed that? Like if you're just lazy with just real simple stuff, and maybe that's just kind of your disposition or whatever, but like men who work hard, typically, men and women, just typically like that character of a Christian man or woman who works hard, who has a strong Christian work ethic, that wants to do things, not just get them done, but do them right. And so I think a lot of work gives us purpose, productivity, and there's a little bit of dignity in that too. And in the New Testament, we're going to see that like when we get there in just a little bit, on the backside, we'll just see that like working is a good thing. Providing for your family is a good thing and a right thing to do. Like it's just something that you should be doing. That should be just normal. So God commands and confirms this importance of work. And like I said, these were kind of the three words I thought about when I think about kind of work: purpose, productivity, dignity. Like not that this supersedes the gospel, but purpose in the sense that like I'm contributing and doing. You know anybody that just enjoys work? There's a few of our folks in here that like y'all just go look for some, like we'll just check this out and make sure this, you're not only are you working like when you have to, it's I would like to see how we can make things better. Like that is extremely important. Like if you're just going, I'm just going to wait until it's absolutely, the people like that, until it's absolutely, the pipes are exploding. Like I'm going to wait till something just blows up before I do anything. No preventative maintenance. And so looking for work is important. In the State Patrol, when we would do, especially when we did like our CQB training in school, close quarter combat, close quarter engagements, and that happens just obviously within all types of scenarios. But typically, if you're smart, if you've called ahead, you're not the only officer dealing with that issue, right? It's better to come with numbers rather than just, you're not Rambo. Like you need help and people. And one of the things that was just always stood out was one of our instructors would always tell us, he says, listen, I don't care where you're at, if you're on a wreck scene, if you pull up at my wreck scene, like if I just pull up as an assisting officer, either you're doing work or you're looking for work. And I always thought, well, that's important, right? Now, listen to me. Don't take that as never rest. You need rest. But if you're someplace where you can actively be helpful, like not just am I doing work, but looking for work. And that could be as simple as, and I know these things are so simple, that could be as simple as you're at somebody's house eating, and like people are kind of talking, and there's dishes to be washed, and you just kind of jump in. Let the lady of the house say, no, don't do that, I'll do that. Does that make sense? Like just look for things to be helpful with. Like just have a mindset that goes, I'm not only working when I have to, but I'm looking for work. And when I say work, that sounds almost like, oh, work. But it's like I'm looking for places to serve and like leave something better than I found it. And I think most people just, that concept is like, why would I do that? Like, why would I do that? Well, I think you should do that. I think you shouldn't just be idle. That's important. So in the Old Testament, we have some principles just in regards to work. And here's a few things I just was reading. Proverbs 14:23 says this, in all toil there is profit, but mere talk tends only to poverty. How many people do you know they just talk about stuff all day? Like, let me tell you something. When somebody tells me, oh, I can do that. Oh, I can do that. I could do that if I wanted to. Okay, good for you. Listen, that's like me watching, that's like somebody watching a Navy SEAL commercial and going, I can do that. Okay, sure. High five. Like, that means nothing. You know how many people I met that were like, you know what? I was going to be a trooper. I was going to be a police officer. I almost joined the military, and I almost went to the Special Forces. I'm like, whoa, you just made that's a big jump right there. I don't care what you say that you can do. I'm looking at what you actually do. Like, potential means nothing, right? Man, he has so much potential. Well, can he apply any of it? So there needs to be, and not everybody's gifted the same ability. I totally understand that, but it's like there needs to be some toil and striving, because there's not any profit if you just sit and talk about it. That's not getting anything done. Proverbs 6:6-11 is a really good text about being lazy and being a sluggard, the Bible calls it. It says, go to the ant. Like, go to the ant. Go look at an ant. I have never seen an ant that was just chilling. Every ant I've ever seen is doing something. They are going somewhere. I don't know where they're going, but they got some little thing on them, and they're going or coming or doing. Go to the ant, O sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief, officer, or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest. How long will you lie there, O sluggard, when you will arise from your sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. So there's an element of like, Christian work ethic is, I'm not going to be lazy. You don't have to become a millionaire, but you do got to work because the Lord has given you the ability to do that. Ecclesiastes 9:10, this is a good one too. Whatever your hand finds to do, whatever that may be, working, whatever that is, do it with your might. For there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol, which would be death, to which you are going. Like, if your hand finds something to do, then you do it well. I mean, I kind of have this thing where, like, I'm really hesitant. Like, if I can't commit to it and do it well, I just would rather not kind of commit to it and do it partial or halfway, and that not be a good, I'm not being a good example. And also, too, for me, I just take a lot of, like, time with stuff that I do, so I don't want it to be just flippantly done. And so, in the New Testament, we have several texts that talk about idleness. We just shouldn't be idle. And so 2 Thessalonians is just a really good text here. 2 Thessalonians 3, 6-12, I believe, says this. Now we command you, brothers, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you keep away from any brother who is walking in idleness and not in accord with the tradition that you received from us. Okay, so he's talking about, do not be surrounding yourself with brothers. Now, notice this. Those are Christian men and women. Like, those are people in the Christian camp who is just simply walking in idleness. Now, I wouldn't say that's not a person that just kind of takes a break or whatever. I'm talking about somebody that just no work, unmotivated, uncommitted. I mean, you can probably think of a person in your life that you probably know that fits that description, and not in accord with the tradition that you received from us, meaning from Paul and his entourage, Timothy and Barnabas. So he says this, for you yourselves know how you ought to imitate us, because we were not idle when we were with you. He says, you remember this, when we were with you, we weren't idle. We weren't just, it may be easy for somebody else's house just to kind of be idle or somebody's hosting you. He says, we weren't idle. Nor, he says this, in verse 8, nor did we eat anyone's bread without paying for it. So we came over for dinner and we're going halvesies on the bread, right? We're paying for our portion. But with toil and labor we work night and day that we might not be a burden to anyone or any of you. So that's a really kind of important principle that Paul lays out, right? There's nothing salvific necessarily about the text, but he's saying, hey, listen, don't be idle. None of you folks be idle. Obviously, for the gospel, you don't need to be idle, but also just in working, don't be idle. When we were with you, imitate us, because when we showed up, we didn't just expect stuff. Now listen, that does not mean that somebody can't bless you with a meal, or somebody can't buy your food or love you well. Don't hear me say that. He's just saying this principle of we showed up, and listen, Paul probably knew they didn't have a lot, so he was not about at all to burden them. So he says, we're not idle. We weren't idle with you. We paid for our stuff as well. He says, it was not because we do not have that right, but to give you and ourselves an example to imitate. Like, sure, you could just you could bless us, for even when we were with you, we would give this command. If anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat. Now, in our culture, there seems to be a reward if you choose not to work. And there are people, and I know that you could talk about government systems and all the things that are happening across the U.S. I'm not here to hash that out. But ultimately, we have made it a reward-based program for you to not eat. You know, we have rewarded people in our culture. It's like, look, if you just want to have some kids, we'll give you more money. Like, we have incentivized brokenness. But really, we've incentivized that. And that blows my mind. It says this, so for we hear that some among you walk in idleness. Not busy at work, but busy bodies. Like, that's the term in Greek. Not busy at work, but busy bodies. Like, here's the deal. You know people like this. If you put, and I've literally thought this to people, even some people in my family sphere, if you put as much effort as you did in being in everybody's business as you would put into work in labor in a specific skill set or area, I think you would be happier because you wouldn't be worried about everybody else's stuff. So Paul uses this word busybodies. Like, stop doing that. Now such persons we command and encourage in the Lord Jesus Christ to do their work quietly and to earn their own living. So he's saying, Paul's going, hey, listen. And he's not talking about the orphan, the widow, the people that can't do that. He's not talking about the people that have been injured or in some situation. He's saying, you guys are perfectly able to function and work, but you're not. You're mooching off of other people. And what would happen to you, and this would happen a lot then, is we see in Acts 2:42, we see this, that all the believers, like, they had things in common. So they would sell stuff to give it to other believers so they would have some stuff, right? The church is being, like, exploding, but it's also being persecuted. And so in those moments, it's like there are times where, like, we're just pooling everything so that everybody can have what they need. And Paul's saying, you guys, there's some folks in here. You know, like, there's some folks in here, I'm not going to mention any names, but some of y'all just idle. And you need to be working and grinding and stop just taking. Like, that's not good. And you guys know as well as I do, is that when somebody does that to such an extent where it's like, man, we have literally given you opportunity after opportunity and you just want to kind of keep taking, that creates it can create, which that's something that we would need to work on, a little bit of a bitterness, because it's like, well, and here's the deal. It doesn't take long to go, I know this guy is busting his tail trying to figure this out. I know he is. He's not just sitting back doing nothing. And most of the time, if we're honest, that person becomes a little bit easier to help, right? The person that's actually not being idle and chill, but it's actually going out and, like, I guess for lack of a better words, hustling and praying and trying to find the right thing. And here's the deal too. We, I think, as the church have an obligation to help people find work. Like, there are people that come to me that go, hey, I'm looking for a job. Man, if you say that, somebody comes in our church in a week and says, hey, I'm looking for work, can you help me? We will open up the phone and the internet, and we will call people. We will be looking for stuff. I am not trying to just simply sustain you for the next 2 days. I would rather you be self-sustaining. A, you're going to find purpose, productivity, and there's a sense of dignity because you can work. We can find you something, right? There's something for everybody. There are jobs out there if people want them. So anyways, ran over with that. So do not be idle. Very good. So why? But here, kind of the ultimate reason, like why should we do this? Why should the Christian work hard? And we're speaking specifically to believers. If a person isn't a believer, it's going to be very hard to motivate them in that way if they're just like, I don't care, if that makes sense. It's going to be very hard to motivate them. But for the believer, this should be very clear. Matthew 5:14 through 16, part of the Sermon on the Mount, we went through that before we got into Genesis, says this, Matthew 5:14 through 16, you are the light of the world. He's speaking to all of these people who are going to be followers of him. You're the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. If you're idle and you sit and there is no productivity, because most of the time when people see Jesus in me, it is because I am out doing something. Just in general. Nobody sees that if I'm just at the house. If I'm just on my phone all day. If that makes sense. Being salt and light is not posting Christian memes on Facebook going, I hope somebody shares this. That's not unhelpful necessarily, but it's not the gospel. It's not going and doing. So you want to be salt and light, kind of have a gospel and evangelism understanding, working hard at work, that produces that. That's where you do that, right? I mean, how many people have you had an impact on your job? I mean, now I'm here as a pastor, so obviously like people are coming here, but whenever I was doing anything else, how I treated people while I worked with the State Patrol created conversations about the gospel. And I couldn't do that if I'm just I don't really care. And listen, everybody knows right now, if you've ever worked at a place, unless you're retired or you're working at a place now, right now if I ask you, who's the person in your job tries to get out of work? Some of you are like, I know that guy, I know that girl. You're like, man, he's always dipping on that stuff, man. Something goes wrong, where's he at? Oh, he's on break, I think. He just took off. Or something goes down, he's always down the hall somewhere. You can't ever find him, right? Oh, I thought, what y'all doing? I was getting this stuff for y'all. There's always that person. You're like, come on now. The believer should not want to be that person. The believer should be like, what you need? You should be the one that people ask to come help, the one who's dependable. Now, there again, I get too, and this was something that I talked about somebody at our church a couple weeks ago. What do you do when you are always the one you're the one that they know will never say no, so they're always pressing you, and then that gets kind of abused? I'm not asking you to get abused or ragged or to be at a place where you're completely burnt out. But you can have a good, strong Christian work ethic and also hold to the principle, especially to the agreed contract for your job, right? Hey, I need you to come work 15, 20 hours and I get paid for it. Well, we're not talking about that. We ain't doing all that. You pay the laborer his wages. That is a biblical thing. So we're not doing crazy. That doesn't mean you just become some martyr at your job and just never get paid. That's not the case. But to be salt and light, because there's a gospel aspect to working and going and doing and being faithful. Look, we should be able to look out and see, man, that guy's different. Why? He loves the Lord. Now, here, these two texts are probably two of my favorite texts as far as the ultimate why of why when you show up, even to a job you dislike or you're not happy with, why you should work faithfully. Colossians 3:23 through 24 says this, whatever you do, whatever that looks like, cutting a tree down, helping your cousin fix the pipes, serving in ministry, doing whatever you're doing, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men. Now, I can remember years ago hearing this in a sermon. I had left here at the State Patrol, and we were at a church in Carrollton, and I remember the pastor there saying this, and I thought to myself, man, there were times in my life that my work and my mindset was geared toward what were men going to think about it? Or how was this going to help me in positionally get where I needed to go? Like, I would just think that way because a lot of my family thought that way. It was just how I grew up. It was what's in it for you, what's in it for him. There was always this angle to be played. But when you read this, Paul goes, whatever you do, you work heartily as for the Lord and not for men. Like if your goal is to please a man, that's always like a fool's errand, if you will, to just make everybody happy there. But you're working hard because why? The Lord desires that you work hard, that you are heartily about that. Knowing, listen to this is what's so good, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward, you are serving the Lord Christ. So when you work, hospital, teaching, on a job, entrepreneur, in this shop, managing these people, supervising, in the church, wherever you're at, what you're doing work-wise is ultimately a pleasing thing to God to do it joyfully and heartily because you know that ultimately all the ability you have to work is from the Lord anyways. So do it in a way that would be pleasing to God and not necessarily trying to please every single human who you're coming in contact with. And when he said that, I just thought, well, that kind of changes the perspective a little bit, right? Here's the deal. My boss with the State Patrol, which I had a tier of NCOs above me, it really didn't matter on a stop whether they knew that I did something that was really, really helpful or not. Or if I did something when nobody saw it. Who saw it? The Lord saw it. He sees everything. We talked about this Sunday. There's no secret sin. And there's also no secret thing that you do that's good that he doesn't see as well. So it's hey man, work heartily, be faithful. And then Ephesians 6:5-8 is another one that I think is really important too. Now this is Paul talking about bondservants. Now we discussed this, I don't know when we talked about bondservants, but it's been, I think we went through, what book did we go through? We went through, was it Colossians or Galatians, and then we went through Philemon, because Philemon was a bondservant. That was where it was. And so in Ephesians 6:5-8, Paul talks about this. Now we discussed what bondservants were. Bondservant was not the same thing, and the word slaves is used in other translations. It wasn't necessarily like slavery like we think of with America's history with slavery. It was kind of it wasn't always mutual, but most of the time it was, hey, I'm going to work for you. You're going to provide X, and then I'm going to give you so many years of service. I provide a service. You provide protection, a place to stay for my family, all of those things. But also, too, y'all, none of the stuff that they owned was really their own. And so most bondservant masters were not mean to their people, but it was just part of the culture. And he says, bondservants, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling, with a sincere heart as you would Christ, not by the way of eye service as people pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, rendering service with a good will as to the Lord, and again, not to man. Knowing that whatever good anyone does, this he will receive back from the Lord. So it was kind of even if you get put into a situation where you're going, this is less than desirable, this is less than satisfactory, my boss is less than stellar. Everybody's had a boss that you were oh man, maybe you dreaded to see, or he's always going to be critical, or you never do enough right, or he's always trying to pick, or whatever the case may be. People have always dealt with that to some degree or another, and Paul's going, listen, whatever the situation is, you just work heartily, right? Unless he's asking you to sin, work heartily, be faithful. There's a reward in that. Do the will of God from the heart. Rendering service, he says, not with just eye service or people pleasing, not just I'm going to do nothing. When he walks in the room, I'm going to act like I'm scrubbing the counters and working hard, right? I think my kids do that sometimes. Clean your room, and I walk in there, spend an hour. The room looks the same, and she's like, Dad, I was just trying to get this toy. It was stuck under the bed. I'm like, okay, cool. Acting like the teddy bear is 6,000 pounds. You know, like just being kids. But that's one thing for kids to do it. That's not okay for you to be 30 or 40 and do that. So it says this, knowing that whatever good anyone does, this he will receive back from the Lord. So the believer in Christ works diligently and faithful from the Lord. The Lord sees that. The Lord sees that, even if your boss doesn't see it. The Lord sees that. Now, the last little line is this, that he will receive back from the Lord. And then the last little line at the end of verse 8 says this, whether he is a bondservant or is free. So even if you're the one over everybody or you're the one under everybody, both of you should work diligently for that. Now, obviously, if the master and the bondservant are both desiring to please the Lord, that relationship will probably work out what? Probably okay. Now, I'm sure many of you have worked for people that were not born-again believers and love the Lord. So if you've worked for people like that, you know that their mindset is not the same as your mindset. Their value system is not the same as your value system. So I think all of this is extremely important. So the why primarily would be because of the gospel, because of evangelism, be salt and light, good work ethic, strong work ethic about like doing your job or even doing something just even if it's just a little thing, it matters and it counts because ultimately God sees all of that. So that's important. So let me just talk about some practical like application stuff. Now for some of you guys, you're going to be like, no big deal, like I know all this stuff. That's fine. But some people, this may be helpful for them. So I was just thinking about some practical applications of things that I've been told over the years that were really helpful. Now I want you to notice this. None of this requires you being super gifted or talented. Like none of it requires you just being a stud at what you do. So this was something that was told very early on. Now with children, this has become more difficult, family, all these things. But be early. But be early. I mean, if you're listening out here and you're like, man, I just don't know. Be early to stuff. If you know the thing starts at 8, man, be there at 7:30. Gives you a little wiggle room to, you know, get gas, get a drink, get some crackers, get a snack, whatever the case may be, and just be mentally prepared. I don't like to show up and just be thrust into things. I just don't like that. Now, sometimes my offspring hold me back a little bit, and that just probably better planning that I need to do. But be early. I think this is a good principle for people. From a Christian work ethic perspective, be early, or at least be on time. But if we start at 6, we'll just shoot for 5:45, right? Just that's when we need to be there. Be early. Be teachable. I meet so many young people, man. Anytime that you try to teach something, it is like, I know that. I mean, I sometimes feel like I'm the perfect parent because there's not a thing that Kate doesn't know. You know? Like I'm just like, I'm killing it because she knows everything. Like I must just be absolutely knocking it out of the park. Stephanie goes, are we just that good of parents? Because there's nothing Kate doesn't know. I'm like, I don't know. I guess we just imparted all this wisdom for her. She knows things I don't know apparently. You know? So, but be teachable. Be able to learn. Be able to sit and gather information, especially from the person that's trying to like instruct you because they know how to do it. I mean, I can remember, like, obviously, right when I left the State Patrol, there wasn't much I couldn't do at all. Now, when I first came in, I just felt like, what in the world? Paperwork, all the systems, the computer stuff. I didn't know how to do any of that. How do you write a warrant? How do you serve a warrant? I didn't know how to do any of those things. And so it was just be teachable, ask questions, and, like, learn the position. And then another thing, too, is this, and I see this all the time, and I think it's because of screen time, and it's because we're so just like squirrel looking everywhere. Be present. How many times have you been with somebody and you're like, man, they ain't even here? You ever been with somebody but they're not there? Like they're physically there, but their mind is somewhere else. Now listen, don't get me wrong. We all have those moments where there's something heavy on our heart and we're just not thinking about what's going on. But being present is really a sign of respect to the person who's engaging with you. I think it's just important that you be present and you be an active listener. And I never understood what that meant until like I got older. To be an active listener. So be early, be teachable, be present. And this is another thing too. This right here is going to be the downfall, I think, of a lot of young people now, is be able to be corrected. Be able to be corrected. All of Trooper School was just one massive, you cannot do anything right. That was just all 8 months was you're just not good at anything. So be able to be corrected. Like if people cannot take criticism, How many of us have ever struggled with that? When something is criticized or like corrected, immediately we take it personal. I was that way. I was like, man, come on now. Like, you hurt my pride. And really, it was just like, hey, man, we just kind of want to do it like this because we feel like it's better, and here's the reason. All right, well, that still hurt my feelings a little bit. And I'm going to tell you what, men can be really bad at this. Like, I find myself, and this is just something that I have just, like, repented of, but, like, there are times in my life where, like, I'll just kind of throw, like, a little pity party. Well, I guess I just can't do nothing right. Like, kind of woe is me, right? You just kind of have those moments of just like, pity, and it's like, well, be able to be corrected, especially when there are people that are older or wiser or have been there speaking truth into your life. Now, I don't think this ever gets like, oh, because you may learn something at 90 years old that you didn't know, and that's perfectly okay. So be able to be corrected, which kind of goes into the be teachable. And so people that are not teachable and they're not able to be corrected, like oftentimes, like if that just cannot happen, like you are going to plateau. Like you're going to plateau. If you can't be corrected, but you always want to correct, I just don't think you can be a good leader. Like I just don't think that's a helpful thing for anybody. And then this is some few things that have just helped me is be organized. Be organized. Just be organized. That's important. Like with your stuff, with your items. My trooper car was labeled. I had labels on everything. It was just, I always cleaned it. I just, like, for me, being organized helped me be ready. If I'm unorganized, I just feel like I'm flustered. So be organized, be prepared, whatever that looks like in your job. Being organized, being prepared. But I think if we'll be some of these things, even if you have a job that you don't love, like you have a chance to either work to a new position or do well enough to where like somebody else may be like, yes, I would love to have you on my team. Because I'm going to tell you this, if you show up, I've told young people this, if you show up on time, if you're teachable, you can be corrected, you're present, you're organized, prepared, and you just work like pretty decently, there will always be a spot for you somewhere. Like you will not believe the number of people, business owners I know in the community that just go, I can't find no good help. I can't find a guy that's got a driver's license, a car, and can pass a drug test. I'm like, well, okay, that's pretty simple, right? Like I've literally, people I've said, hey, so-and-so's looking for a job. He's like, send him. I'll pay him $20 an hour. Will he be on time? Will he just show up and just be at my house at 7? Yeah, sure. Like that just doesn't seem too difficult, but you would be shocked at how many people couldn't do that. My state patrol class, the 105th Trooper School, they had roughly, and this is what I was told, I don't know the exact number, but they said that for our school, they only take 50. That is the number, the number is 50. I think that was the number for my school. They had 3,500 applications. Over half could not pass the drug test. You're applying for a law enforcement position. You're just going to smoke a little weed and be like, let's go to the restroom in a cup? Like, what were you thinking? Like, you knew it was coming. You knew it was coming 6 weeks out, 2 months out. I mean, it just blows my mind. And then people would show up and like, I can't believe I didn't get hired. Like, you can't believe you didn't get hired. I can't believe you're coming up here asking about not getting hired. So, if there, I mean, just at a bare minimum, these things will exponentially, like, advance somebody. But this should be normal within the Christian work ethic. And there are different levels of organization. I get it. Some people's tool bag look like Harbor Freight, threw up in it. I get it, and you know where everything's at. That's awesome. My stuff is labeled and nice and in a row. You don't have to be like that. But be organized for you and be prepared for you. And also, too, I just think this is important. Because has anybody ever been in a place where they were not happy working? They were like, man, I don't want to do this forever. Everybody's been in that spot. For the believer, be faithful where God has you at presently. Wherever you're at, just be faithful. Like, and I know it's hard. It seems more difficult to be faithful if you're not happy at what you're doing. But let me tell you this. Your happiness is not the most important thing. Especially once you are married and you have a family. I know men right now that I've talked to them that literally quit their job with nothing even remotely on the horizon simply because they were not happy about what happened. They got a wife, they got a kid, they got a mother-in-law they're supporting. I mean, they got all these responsibilities, bills, and it's like, I'm just not going to do this no more. And I'm going, what? That's crazy. Well, he was being this way to me. Or you won't believe what they wanted us to do next week at work. I'm like, I don't care. You stay in it till you got something else. Well, I just couldn't handle it. Listen, you can handle more than you think. I mean, am I right? I mean, anybody that's older in here goes, oh, you can handle more than you think. So, and I think that this is just another kind of rant too, but I think that young people have just not had to do really hard things. and here's the thing too, with our kids, and this is just I'm learning. Like I have almost an 8-year-old and almost a 3-year-old, so I'm learning as I go. Like I am learning from some of our couples here that are older. Like I'm adapting, growing, learning. But here's the deal: we have a little statement at our house that we always say: sextons can do hard things, and sextons will do hard things. Here's the problem with doing hard things, and this is just honest. Look, everybody in here that's older than me, which is most of you guys in here right now, when you were younger, doing hard things was just kind of part of the process because there was just no other way to really do it other than it being difficult, right? It was just tough. And your parents and grandparents had it even worse than you did. The problem is that everything is expedited in our culture. So we, at our house, have to almost create hard things for our kids to do so that they do not become soft and lazy. Does that make sense? I mean, everything they have is just, we have neighbors, and it's like every meal is DoorDash to their house, just brought up to the door. Groceries are delivered right to their door. They don't have to interact with people. They don't have to engage with anybody. They all work from home, and everybody just stays in it's like what do you need? Whoa, why do we need to go anywhere? And in my mind, I'm going, I just don't know if that's helpful. I just don't know if that's helpful. How do they interact with people? How do they learn to talk? Because I see them, and they're just like, oh, like a zombie. Or they're walking on the road on their iPad, and I'm going, that's crazy. We have, Kate will have friends come over to the house and play. Within 5 minutes, can we turn the TV on? Do you have an iPad? Where's your phone at? And Kate will be like, huh? And kids, look, our kids will come in our neighborhood. They'll play. They'll go home to get their iPad and come back. And Stephanie said, we're not bringing that in the house. You can put it on the porch. And they're just like, what? But my mama said, she said, I'm not your mom. You can go back to your house if you want to play on that. We ain't doing that here. Like just little things like that. And so we almost have to go, we're going to make things difficult and hard. That's why Kate and I like to go camping, right? Because she has to do hard things. That's why we play softball on teams. She has to do hard things. She has to win. She has to lose. She has to work. She has to grind. Nothing's given to her. So it's like, and I know that like, it's not because the means aren't there and we couldn't do it if we wanted to. It's that I do not want her to be 20 years old and be absolutely unable to function. And so, like I said, I know there's some ranting in that too, but I just want us to know that, like, I think hard work, gospel evangelism, like if she never talks to anybody when she's young and doesn't have to do those things, this is going to be really difficult when she gets older. How can she be effective for the faith if she's just has no interaction and nothing's required of her? So we're going to do hard things. And not only are we going to do hard things with them, Mom and Dad are also going to do those same hard things. I want to ask her to do something that I'm not doing myself. So the Christian work ethic should be driven, it should be motivated, it should be fired up, because you're not ultimately working for anybody but for the Lord, even if you're working for yourself. So anyways, I hope that was helpful. Hope some of the application. Some of you guys are like, preaching to the choir, man, I know all this. 100%, I know that. But some people, I think, they do struggle with that. And here's the deal. You are not owed anything in this life. You are not owed a single thing in this life. So you work diligently and you depend feverishly on the Lord for all of those things. So hopefully that was helpful. Know that we love you guys listening. Service 10 a.m. on Sunday. And we will be in Genesis 11 Sunday. We're going to cover the whole chapter. It's family worship service, family worship Sunday. And we're going to be talking about the Tower of Babel. So that'll be a really good one for the kids to be in here for. So anyways, thank you guys, and know that we love you. We're praying for you, and we'll see you Sunday.